I think you ought to know. Black Men's Radio. The place where men and women really speak. Oh man, what a show. It's Men's Radio. This crazy show is on 3 times a week. Now Russ and Phil are there to help with all your cares. We laugh, we cry, we talk like grown-ups do. But if you're sad and low, it won't cost you no dough. Men's Radio, that's the place for you. With Russ Kane and Phil Dave.
Not our pump pickers. Shut up. Fantastic.
Dear, oh dear.
Fantastic.
Hello.
Greetings, one and all. Greetings, young Phil, the Count of Cravats. And one day that's going to go horribly wrong when I say that.
I've been called something very similar.
Yeah, I thought maybe you misheard it, but they like your cravats, they like your 3-piece suits, and I got to tell you something about Phil. We had a little bit of sunshine this week. The sun actually broke through. Phil arrived.
No, you'd never know for today.
No, today's back to British summer. Anyway, Phil arrives to spend a mere 5.5 hours on trying to sort out tech. 5.5 hours. Everybody else is in t-shirts, pair of jeans, or maybe even shorts. Not Phil. A black 3-piece suit, cravat, and hat.
Well, have to maintain standards.
Well, it is what it is. It is what it is. Right, what we got going here? We got Hello, Russ and Phil from Robert Van Buren.
Very nice.
Lag. There we are.
Hello,
and
Robert Van Buren.
Also, it's pouring. Yesterday, I searched for your show, just realized I had the wrong day. Elizabeth, Beauty and Brains. A deadly, deadly mix.
Don't worry, Elizabeth. It happens to all of us. I turned up to yesterday's show as well.
Yeah. So did I. Julie Boyce, formerly of Houston, and now of Guildford. I never tire of saying that. I never tire.
Much better.
Go on. What it says.
Julie says, now it's possible that I may have missed it, but I don't seem to have seen the announcement for a certain Mr. Kane and Mr. Dave joining the cast of Strictly this year. Definitely a trick missed by the BBC. Now, Julie, you're quite right. We weren't allowed to say anything on this earlier until today, but I can exclusively reveal that Russ and I were indeed approached to go on Strictly. They actually, the problem is that we couldn't agree the terms and conditions. They wanted us to be this year's same-sex couple. We said no thanks, and they just weren't having it. So we did try, but unfortunately they weren't interested because they thought they'd get 2 for 1.
And let me tell you,
and so we had to tell them to bog off.
We told them to bog off, and let me tell you this: those of you who have been fortunate enough to see Phil Dave's Paso Doble have been amazed. Amazed.
Yeah, it's particularly hard to do with 2 left feet.
It is.
Oh,
it's Paso Doble. It's the talk of Old Compton Street. It is.
Let's hope not, because that could be quite worrying.
Hey, Phil, I've got a good idea. Let's go to the Ivy Club.
We could do. My mother says, hello, boys.
Hello, boy. Right, ladies and gentlemen.
I think we should explain. I think we should explain, just in case anyone's wondering. We don't like in-jokes. We can't do in-jokes on this show. That's not very nice. But just a little thought is that the other day, Russ, myself, and the lovely Chantal Rickards, we had decided it was long overdue that we'd meet up for a spot of dinner, you see. Anyway, we did. And we went to this place in Piccadilly Circus. Very nice. Why not, indeed? And then afterwards, we're thinking of how to carry on the conversation. Where else could we go to carry on said conversation? And I suggested that we go to the Ivy Club. Just so happens I have a temporary membership there, and I thought I'd try and make the most out of it. Why not, indeed? Anyway, yes, I know. Right, well, I thought you kicked the habit. Anyway, So we went to.
I think I'm going to start it again.
So don't get confused with the talcum powder; it hurts. Now, when we made our way over to said club, I was mildly horrified to discover the shutter was down because I've never seen this before. It's always open. So Mr. Kane clearly wasn't very impressed by this because he's not really sort of let it go since it happened. And I was just trying to make.
I could run this for another 6 months. I can think of worse
things. That's all.
No, I know. And who wouldn't like to push their way through a crowded Soho for no reason? Anyway, we retired to the Soho Whiskey Club, and they've got to restock after Phil visited. Ladies and gentlemen, this man travels more than Judith Chalmers. He's a terrific guy and horribly witty with his emails and stuff. He is our personal theatre critic, Mr. Jonathan Baz.
Oh,
good afternoon.
You almost had to think about that one, Jonathan, didn't you?
The jet lag is still easing off. I've spent the last 7 days crisscrossing the United States.
I
so
see.
It's been very busy.
Whereabouts in the US have you been?
Oh God! Right, we'll start with Miami. You can bolt on Toronto. That wasn't in the US technically. But then back to Miami, San Diego, Los Angeles, and back to London. So it's been a lot. Sadly, no live theatre in the course of that week. So it's been a bit of all work and no play.
What?
Well, in that case, this has been the quickest conversation we've ever had with you, Jonathan. It's been great. Thanks.
Wow.
There you go.
So,
anyway.
It's been great. Thanks, Jonathan.
However, before I boarded the plane, I was made sure that I was stocked up with fresh stuff to share with you.
Excellent.
Bless you.
So I have 3.
Did the plane do the same? Because it's very annoying when you're on a plane and they forget to stock it with food.
The plane was fine. God bless him.
I'm more worried about they forget to stock it with fuel.
All in all, it seemed fueled and tanked in all the right places.
Oh, thank God. Right. Okay.
Branson's team on the flights did jolly good jobs.
Okay.
Anyway, 3 shows. And all on this occasion with a musical flavour of some sort.
Someone's at the door.
First up, a show that, in fact, this week they've announced they're extending for 1 more week, which is La Cage aux Folles, currently playing in Regent's Park's open air theatre, which, when the weather is dry and the evening is balmy, it is an absolutely gorgeous venue. When it's raining, it's a touch more challenging. But
sucks.
I happened to be the first press night, in fact, got rained off, unfortunately. I was fortunately there for the second press night. And I have to say, it is a gorgeous production of Jerry Herman's musical. If you don't know La Cage aux Folles, loosely, it's based around a nightclub, I think on the French Riviera. And it's a nightclub where the star act and the performers are drag artists, and the lead performer Albin is in a very long-term relationship with a gentleman called George. The play is all about the dynamic between these 2 guys. George has a child from his marriage of many, many years back. Child wants to get married. All sorts of family pressures and issues of identity emerge through the show. I won't get too detailed and bogged down in that. And throughout this journey, there are some gorgeous, gorgeous songs. The 2 lead performers, a chap called Carl Mullany plays Albin, and Billy Carter plays George. Albin is given the show's biggest number of I Am What I Am, which closes the first half. And I have to say, he is absolutely gorgeous, sensational. It's a very, very lovely evening at the theatre. The design of the show, the costumes are a treat to look at. The choreography is good fun. And assuming you're there on a dry evening, as the twilight increases, as the sunlight fades, and gradually the stage lighting becomes more and more important, it really gives a lovely texture to the scenery, to the place. The supporting cast are extremely good as well. And I think I summed up by describing it as an enchanting night of musical theatre, and a very lovely story, very well told.
Do you know, it has to be said that you've given the most sound piece of advice I think you could ever give anyone who is going to watch La Cage aux Folles, because I actually did go and see, not this exact production, but I went to go and see a production of it a good few years ago. And I can't remember who I went with, but they said, look, we're going to go and watch this. We're going to go and watch La Cage aux Folles. Do you want to come with? And I always think to myself, well, I love the theatre, so why not indeed? I have quite traditional values, should we say, as you can probably tell from my dress sense. And of course, I didn't know what the storyline was of La Cage aux Folles. And for whatever reason. So I didn't really think anything of it. And I got there and I couldn't quite understand why the audience were a little more flamboyant than I'm used to seeing in Theatreland.
Flamboyant.
Don't get me wrong, why not indeed enjoy yourself and knock yourself out to some degree. And then the production started, and as this thing unfolded, I sort of found myself sort of genuinely thinking, my goodness me, I have lived a life that is very much wrapped in cotton wool. So it was quite the eye opener, to say the least. Certainly wasn't expecting half of what I saw, but it was also, it was starring Graham Norton at the time. And oh yes, yeah, Graham Norton did it. He took the lead, and it's
Can he sing? Can Graham sing?
I didn't remember. I think I was slightly preoccupied by what I was watching to see whether or not anyone could sing or not. But it was a fascinating production, to say the least, and one that
Graham Norton,
I would say is an eye opener.
He did theatre.
Yes, well, quite.
Well, to the extent the stars of this show are well known in the land of musical theatre, but they're not household names outside necessarily of musical theatre. But I have to say their work is brilliant. Carl Mullany as Alban, who sings this passionate song about his identity in I Am What I Am. And I'm not going to say what prompts him to sing that song, because that would give away a bit of the spoiler of the story. But it's very powerful, it's moving, and it's also brilliantly sung and a great spectacle. A shout out to the choreographer, Stephen Mear, who's a brilliant guy, and he does magic with his cast. And as I say, it's an enchanting night and great fun, so long as the rain holds off.
What else have you happened upon?
Jonathan, serious question, just for a sec. How much notice does the audience get if it's going to be cancelled? And how are they told, don't come, we're not doing the show?
Russ, honestly, I don't know. Straight up, best place to answer that question is going to be on the website of the Open Air Theatre, who are going to give, I'm pretty sure there's a pretty good description of what happens if it rains. If it rains a lot, I think if it rains a little, I've sat there through drizzly productions in the past, and you just get a bit wet.
I was going to say, I happen to know that with Open Air Theatre, from experiences there in the past myself, is that if it does rain lightly, that is not enough of a reason for it to cancel. They will persevere, because if every time that it started spitting, could you imagine, they'd just cancel everything. So they do carry on with that. They advise audience members to bring ponchos. You are not allowed.
Pack-a-mac. Bring a pack-a-mac.
You are not allowed an umbrella. You cannot put an umbrella up in the audience for obvious reasons, because you'll block the view for the people behind. So you have to wear poncho only.
No, it'll block your view.
Absolutely. So you have to wear poncho only. And then they also say that if a performance does get rained off, that is not grounds for a refund. Instead, what they do is they give you what's called a transferable ticket. So you don't necessarily have to see that production again, but you can book something else. It's all terms and conditions of the Open Air Theatre. I think people do know that, though, that when they book it, they have to know it's not going to be a guaranteed success, shall we say, otherwise.
I have to say, a few years ago, I went to the Regent's Park Open Air Theatre. Three of us went and had a lovely picnic and stuff beforehand. And it was a boiling hot day. Oh. It was marvellous. Absolutely loved it. It was a terrific. It's the only time I've ever been to see it. But I can't remember what it was. It was a big Broadway kind of musical type thing. Lots of fun. It was absolutely terrific. I've seen Midsummer Night's Dream at the Open Air Theatre. That was quite an eye opener. That was nice. Graham, you're quite right. You're quite right.
Yeah,
as
Graham says the run has been extended. It was on until the 16th of September, now on until the 23rd of September. I mean, it's received rave reviews across the board.
Excellent.
Next up, not so much theatre, but still sticking with music and dance. This one is Matthew Bourne's Romeo and Juliet, which has returned to Sadler's Wells for the month of August. It's not a new production, it's a revival. His Romeo and Juliet has been on before. And I've got to be honest, hands up, I'm not a ballet expert. But reminiscent of a famous John Cleese line, where Michelangelo has come to paint the Sistine Chapel, and John Cleese says to Michelangelo, who I think was played by Jonathan Miller, he said, "Look, I may be the Pope, but I know what I like." And in that context, as I say, I'm no ballet expert, but I know what I like. And Matthew Bourne's choreography in dance work is, well, otherwise it wouldn't be choreography. Matthew Bourne's choreography is gorgeous. He's taken this classic Shakespeare's tale of Romeo and Juliet, and as the program notes say, it's set in, quote marks, the Verona Institute in the not too distant future. So it's given a very modern staging. At times it's quite harsh on the eye in terms of the style. But whilst you've got Prokofiev's fabulous music there, I found hints of, and this is why I was sort of name dropping on films of decades ago, I found hints of Lindsay Anderson's If, a little bit of A Clockwork Orange, and maybe just a whiff of Alan Clark's Scum thrown into this Veronan Institute for good measure. Notwithstanding that, and like I say, I'm no dance expert, but this company's dance work is tremendous. These performers have got more talent in their middle finger, each of them, than I could ever dream of having across my entire four limbs. The way they move, the way they tell the story through mime. At times you've got to keep up a bit. Who are the Montagues? Who are the Capulets? It's not always that easy, but that's really a minor quibble. Because to watch these people move, tell the story, is just lovely. You catch the romance, you catch the violence, you catch the tragedy, and it's all a bit bloody at the end, sadly, as they all die, which sort of wraps up as I...
Oh, spoiler alert, spoiler alert.
Truly, truly ripping yarn. But what I find quite pleasing about...
On the plus side, it makes the curtain call quite quick, though.
What I find quite pleasing about Matthew Bourne's work is his company is assisted by Arts Council England, and it nearly always goes on tour and goes around the country. So the productions are accessible to thousands and thousands of people around the country. And also, it's talent. It's performers who are at the top of their game. And I consider it to be Arts Council England's money being very well spent. You may not like some of Matthew Bourne's ideas. Maybe they're too modern. Maybe they're not too modern. Call it what you will. Nonetheless, you've got a very talented choreographer who is producing dance work from his company, all of whom are extremely gifted individuals at using their bodies to tell a story. And to that extent, well done to them, and well done to Arts Council England for lobbing them a few bob every year. Well worth seeing. It's on until September the 2nd. That's at the Sadler's Wells. The final, I've only got 3 shows for you this week. The final.
That's good, though.
3 is a good number.
3 is a good number. Yeah.
Final one is Mrs. Doubtfire, that opened a few weeks ago at the Shaftesbury Theatre.
I really want to go and see it.
I really would rather drill a masonry nail into my skull and see that.
Oh, can I help you do that?
Yes. You do every time we work together.
Form an orderly queue. So Mrs. Doubtfire is I've got to be honest, it is a very well produced take on the Robin Williams movie, which you may recall. Married couple, they're falling apart, divorce, separation. She has the kids. He wants access to his kids, and he applies for the role of housekeeper that his estranged wife or divorced wife, I forget the details, has advertised for. And of course, in the movie, Robin Williams, with some fabulous makeup and costuming and a bloody good performance as well, transforms himself into Mrs. Doubtfire, this Scottish nanny come governess. And of course,
hello dear.
No one realizes it's Robin Williams and the kid's dad, and it's all very, very lovely. The story pans out, and I'm not going to go into how the story explodes and ends, etc., etc. But the movie was 5-star brilliant. The musical in the West End is 4-star, very good. All of the performances on stage are top notch, and the guy who plays Mrs. Doubtfire, the husband role, is a chap called Gabriel Vick, whose vocal work, his ability to do impersonations and to convince as Mrs. Doubtfire is very, very good. My fault and my criticism of the production is that part of his transformation, and I mean, to be fair, on screen, when Robin Williams was going through his transformations, yes, it's all happening very fluidly on screen, but behind the scenes, a movie that takes 2 hours to watch will have taken months to film and hours and days of makeup work before they film 30 seconds worth of Robin
That's right,
Williams.
Hours of prosthetics.
Correct. So here, those transformations have to be done in a split second on stage. And the bulk of the prosthetic work is done by effectively a prosthetic mask of a Robin Williams lookalike of Mrs. Doubtfire, that as Gabriel Vick is putting on the woman's outfit, the busted dress, etc., he also puts on a rubberized mask of effectively Robin Williams' Mrs. Doubtfire. And yes, it works. One's convinced that it's the Mrs. Doubtfire from the story. But for me, that was a shame, because in the movie, it was all Robin Williams, sure, with clever makeup and camera effects, etc. But it was still, in essence, Robin Williams who you were looking at. Here on stage, it's Robin Williams' face that's coming back over the face mask. And that, to me, is just a little bit of a distraction that takes away from it. I could be being a bit of a purist. I found it a bit of a disconnection between seeing the real emotion.
I agree.
No, hang on a second. I tell you where I have a slight problem with that, though. But don't you think that if it was someone who looked too much like the actor playing Mrs. Doubtfire rather than the original, people say, well, that's not Mrs. Doubtfire. Doesn't look anything like Mrs. Doubtfire.
Well,
but it should be. What, you don't think that with Macbeth? You don't think that with all the stuff at 42nd Street?
No. But hang on a second. But Mrs. Doubtfire, everyone knows Mrs. Doubtfire as a character, though, don't they?
Because it was the genius. Because it was the genius of Robin Williams. My big problem is that Robin Williams was 1 in 50 million who comes along once every lifetime. He was that brilliant, that gifted, that exceptional. I don't want to see a carbon copy of it. I don't want to see an ersatz Robin Williams, because it was Robin Williams. I wish they'd have left it alone. I mean, I don't want to go and see. I don't want to see musicals particularly, but I certainly don't want to see when it's been a film which the main lead is so imprinted by their brilliance and their personality. I don't want to see it like I don't want to see Back to the Future. I have no interest.
I respect what you're saying, and you know the same is true, which has not been turned into a musical, of Dustin Hoffman's Tootsie. Again, these spectacular performances where you know all along who the actor is inside, and the male actor is inside the woman's dress. Yeah. But you're stunned and you're carried with the story. I think, Russ, what I would have to say is, and I respect your opinion and I share it, as I've just said, but Mrs. Doubtfire is still a lovely story, and there are going to be families who are a lot younger than you and I, who won't have that association with Robin Williams.
I get that.
And I think if you're looking, listen, if you can afford 4 West End tickets for a family, because Lord knows that's a spend in itself. And I have to say, that's one of the things that I found very encouraging about regional theatre, where at least regional theatre operates at regional prices, rather than the scalping of the West End pricing structure. But if you're looking for a family show to take your other half and kids or whoever it may be, then you are going to have a very good time at the show, unquestionably. It's very funny, and it works, and it's lovely, but it's not the movie.
Okay, can I just start one final question, because we've probably taken up more than enough of your time, but just one final question about this. Is it predictably funny in so much as that if you know the movie, you are going to know all of the jokes and the references of humor within, or have they twisted it slightly so that there are some unexpected moments of humor on stage?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't remember too many unexpected moments.
Okay.
I have to say, overall, I thought the piece was very good. A lot of good people have put a lot of good work into it, but for the purists, it's a little bit ersatz.
Interesting. All right, Jonathan, thank you.
Bless you, Jonathan. Thank you. I always enjoy your time with us, because it saves me a lot of time sitting through stuff that I don't want to see. And also, it encourages.
I thought you were going to say it saves you having to natter to me for half an hour, but yes.
Well, that in itself is a God-given gift. Jonathan, thank you so much, as always. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. See you in a couple of weeks, fella. Bye. And now, ladies and gentlemen, as if by magic, live from somewhere in London, 32 the High Street, just above the kebab shop, please welcome the screen queen herself, Chantal Rickards OBE.
Good morning. How are you both?
Well, very good afternoon to you. Are you okay? Have you survived being with us the other day? So that's something.
It is what it is. You know, what can you say?
We should do that more often. You know, we should have maybe a monthly gathering.
Oh God, you think?
No, too frequently.
Well, I'm just putting it out there. I'd be up for that.
It's Phil. He just drags me down.
It was a very nice evening and lovely to see you.
It was most pleasant. It was most pleasant. It's always lovely to see. I hate to say it, to see you both. I said it. Okay. God, I said it. How are you?
I'm good. Have you been having a good week?
No, not at all. Not the least.
So good that his picture froze a bit there.
No.
I feel like you have opened a proverbial can of worms.
I'm laughing because I know what my I'm laughing, Shantas, because I know what my week's been like. Not showing any signs of improving anytime soon. Anyway, there we go.
No.
There we go. It's fine. It's fine. Right. What? Oh well, it's all mush. What have you found?
Hang on. You're forgetting something again, don't you know?
Oh.
It is time for Chantal to not hear herself. Because indeed, we love TV. Oh, good, so good. We listened to it twice. We love TV, indeed, and of course, it would just not be right to ask Chantal what has caught your periphery.
Well, I tell you where I was going to start this morning. It was just a brief mention of one of my old TV presenters, Michael Parkinson, who sadly left the planet on Wednesday. Famous Yorkshireman, I think more famous for being a Yorkshireman really than anything else. You know, one of the great chat show hosts, and I had the pleasure of working on the Parkinson team. God, at the end of the 80s, I think it was the end. I think something like the end of the 80s, when we used to just take one main celebrity in each show, which meant that, and I was a researcher in those days, of my early days of television, but it meant you really had to know the person incredibly well, because Michael was going to interview them for 45 minutes. And so you can't ask, you know, naive, dumb questions. So it was very demanding, much more demanding than I thought it was going to be. And he was a pretty demanding guy. He started as a journalist. and everything needed to be done with great sort of journalistic integrity. But, you know, sad that he's gone, because he was, you know, absolutely part of British television for probably 3 decades, where he was really very, very, very well known. And anyway, got to the age of 88 and sadly left us a couple of days ago. So I thought I'd just mention Michael. The Parkinson Show, there are lots of reruns on lots of different stations, hither and thither. So if you're interested, go back and see them. He was a good interviewer. He liked everything very methodically set out for him. And, you know, pushed his team pretty hard, but a fabulous...
When you say he pushed it, I'm always fascinated with the backstage view, because we see the public face, which is quite often totally different, as you know, especially from your time in Hollywood. Oh my God, a land of monsters. When you say he was, well, I mean, we won't say who, but they are despicable, so, and just horrible, horrible people. And of course, the corollary is their public persona is charming and lovely and delightful. The camera stops and the monster emerges, the true self. What was he like? You say he was demanding. What do you mean by demanding?
Well, I would say he was a journalist first and a sort of television broadcaster second. And he started out life really, you know, as a journalist on the Manchester Guardian. So getting the facts right was incredibly important to him. So you couldn't write a brief that was slightly loose. You couldn't leave anything open to misinterpretation. He wanted the facts absolutely accurate. You couldn't write waffle for him. He had a very good writer who actually wrote the interview outline, a guy called Chris Greenwood, who I liked enormously. And he would structure the interview for Michael. But the point that everybody has to remember is that they're the ones whose neck is on when they're in front of the camera. So, and they're
completely. I get that.
Yeah,
I do understand it. I still will never ever see it as an excuse to mistreat someone. I'm not saying he did, but I just say that for those I know who do mistreat their team, I've never seen that as an excuse. I think you know what you're going into when you take on a job like that. You are putting your neck on the line, but then it's your neck. Don't start passing the buck on to someone whose neck is not on the line, because otherwise they would have chosen that job. Do you see what I mean? I don't really sort of see that as an excuse myself.
Here's my point. my point on that, and it's a very interesting point. And there's two sides to that. And Chantal has been in the industry, you know, really deep and a very top level. Number one, it is the presenter's neck on the block, because the viewer will say, well, that presenter was rubbish. They didn't ask the right questions. They don't go, well, that research, and if you look all the way down the credits at the end of the show, Chantal Rickards, well, you didn't do it. They wouldn't know. They wouldn't know. I get that. But as Phil says, you have the absolute right to demand, and more importantly, to expect professionalism. That's what you're paying people to do. What you don't have, and I agree with Phil on this a lot, we were talking about it the other night, you don't have the right to be rude. I have the right for our team at MRS to say, I don't think this has been done correctly. I'm sorry, do it again. That's perfectly right. I do not have the right to be insulting or rude. And I can't bear when people do that, because you're crossing a line which should not be crossed.
Can I just say, as a finishing note before we do get on to sort of what you have selected this week, is that I won't forget that when I went to go and see, and I saw a couple of times the Parkinson Show being recorded, because I was that kind of geek who went to go and watch recordings of television shows, and Parky was one of them. And I remember that it was one we went to go and see where he interviewed Mel Brooks and Anne Bancroft, which was absolutely superb. I have never, ever forgotten that, because even though it was in Studio A in London Weekend Television, so it was the largest studio, or Studio 1, I should say. So it was the largest studio there. You were way away from the stage. It was, I mean, you might as well needed binoculars to actually see what was going on. You would have had a better view on television, because the audience was so large. I think Studio 1 in LWT held 500 people, I think it was, something like that. So if it was that amount, you could imagine that you could be quite a way away. But anyway, that was not the point. The lasting moment from that, I can't remember if it was that episode or another one I went to go and see, but he had an interview with a fairly well-known singing diva, which I think it was. Can't remember who it was, but all I know is that there was well, actually, I do remember who it was. I'm just not going to say it because it could be it could be a bit libelous. But let's just say that what happened was before the show started, he went. Apparently, he likes to sort of have a brief chat with the guests to let them know sort of what's going to happen. And this particular diva was talking to her team. This was in the studio environment, so it wasn't even like it was behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And she, for whatever reason, wasn't quite ready to speak to Parky. Right? He was ready. He wanted to have a chat with his guests beforehand. She wasn't ready to speaking to one of her team, and said something along the lines of, "I'm not done yet. Can't you see I'm talking?" or something like that.
Wow.
Something along those lines. Wow. And all I know is that you hear Parky sort of walking away, saying something like "stupid girl," and walks away sort of whilst he's sort of waiting for this person to be ready. I'll never forget it because I just thought, this is what goes on behind the scenes. And of course they go live and you just think you'd never know.
No, that's the magic of television, that, yes, rather sadly, there are frustrations and anxieties and bad tempers and all sorts of things going on behind the scenes, which, hopefully doesn't happen as often as it used to, but in the old days.
Hang on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Yeah.
One episode, Sharon Osbourne was in the audience and started screaming at Chris.
Oh, really?
A most abusive, horrendous language. And Chris doesn't shake easily. I mean, we were both kind of cut pretty much from the same mold of screw you sort of thing. And in front of the audience were dying. They were like, "Oh my God!"
Wow.
It was just awful.
Yeah, it's rare to see on the set, actually, because they don't like losing their temper in front of the audience, because. No.
But she was a member of the audience. She wasn't on the panel, or she's just sitting there, and she'd taken offence to something that she thought Chris had said. It hadn't actually.
My mother recalling the time that Parky interviewed Meg Ryan. Of course.
My God, that was hideous. Hideous.
Yes, that went horribly wrong. Yeah. And
he really did lose his. By the way, I just want to state for the record, I thought Michael Parkinson was the master, because you've said what a great interviewer he was. I think as equally importantly, what a great listener he was.
Yeah.
Compare him to, say, Jonathan Ross. It's all about Jonathan. Anyway, let's not go there. Yeah. He was fantastic. And I wrote on Facebook this week, you felt, this was just my take on it, you felt you'd been invited somehow to a wonderful dinner party, and you'd just sit there really quietly listening to the conversation of these fabulous people, larger than life characters, and you felt kind of privileged. And there we go. That's it.
Do you know what a mark of his consistency was? This is what I love about it. I absolutely love the way that most people know his theme tune. He stuck with the same theme tune for all those years, and it was a hallmark in the true sense of the word, a hallmark of British broadcasting.
Yeah, it absolutely was. I'm trying to think whether he had a catchphrase.
Don't think so.
I don't know. I mean, David Frost was hello, good evening and welcome.
Hello, good evening and welcome.
Exactly. But I can't think of one that Parky had, to be honest. But anyway, there we are. So I just thought I'd just mention the name just because there was a little bit of history there. Personal history for me. It was the first big chat show that I ever worked on. And it was, it was fun. It certainly opened my eyes to how people wanted things very, very precise. And
although I did rather enjoy the way that David Frost always used to say, as we go through the keyhole.
Oh, it takes me back. Right. I'm going to bring us right up to speed, actually right up to speed, but then take us straight back to the 1940s. Everybody's been talking about Oppenheimer, and it's actually taken me until this week to go and see it. It's good for so many reasons. The one reason it's not good, in my personal opinion, is it's 3 hours long. And I am absolutely campaigning with people in Hollywood to try and cut down the length of the running time of films.
3 hours. It was like 3 days. It felt like 3 days.
Simply too long. But having said that,
long-ass film,
remarkable. It's Christopher Nolan, who is probably the leading British film director. Educated at University College London, my old uni. So I have great affection for Chris, and I met him a few times in Hollywood. He's a great bloke. Produced by his wife Emma. And they have put together this extraordinary story about the father of the atom bomb, Robert Oppenheimer, J. Robert Oppenheimer, who was an American, came from a very privileged, very wealthy family. His father's heritage was, he was from Prussia, came over at the end of the 19th century, and they had a very good upbringing and a wonderful life in New York. He was obviously highly, highly bright. He was partly educated at Harvard and then at Berkeley and at Cambridge, where he famously fell out with one of his tutors and he put poison into his tutor's apple, actually in an attempt to kill him. But the apple wasn't eaten, fortunately.
Some watching a little too much Snow White, methinks.
Yeah. Well, this little clip of his life is shown in the film, and you think, oh my God, what's going to happen next? The real story behind that was he was caught, it was found out, but he suffered from depression. And I think that that's one element that wasn't really developed fully enough in the film. The guy was tormented for all sorts of reasons, really from his childhood upwards, but also later on when the story of the atom bomb and the Manhattan Project goes all the way through to the first explosion in Los Alamos, 6 weeks before Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And then, of course, you get the regret that kicks in afterwards into this human's life. And he is very regretful, really, of what he's done. He is, in fact, it's never decided if he's a member of the Communist Party, but he's sort of a pacifist and ends up creating the world's most awful weapon.
Well, you see, here's the thing that wasn't explained.
Yeah.
When they were deciding where to drop the bomb on, first thing first, and it's a real moral issue. Germany had capitulated, that was it, they'd surrendered.
Yeah.
So they had a weapon that was not going to be unused on Germany, as was the plan. And don't forget that many of the people who had designed the bomb were Jewish, and therefore it was propelling them because they knew what was going on in the camps, and they thought, well, F you, let's show you what happens. They couldn't do that because Germany had surrendered. They then thought, okay, well, we've got these weapons. Let's go to Japan. Okay. They look at the map of Japan. Oppenheimer, which is not shown in the film, Oppenheimer selects the target. So when you say, and the view is, oh, he was a pacifist, he didn't really know. Mate, you're looking at the map. You're circling Hiroshima, you're circling Nagasaki. You know that not only are there factories there, but all the workers live there. You know what's going to happen. You know the power of the weapon. Boom. You know, the argument, of course, runs, we are theorists. We don't decide where it's used. We're merely theorists.
Wasn't there?
I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. And the problem is, when you are that, as you beautifully said, Chantal, as you always do, when you're that intelligent, that brilliant, you're kind of on the spectrum. You're kind of on the spectrum. You don't have social skills. This was a man with zero social skills, but a complete genius.
Yeah.
But
people have said that to me before.
Yeah. But you'd have circled Brent Cross and Westfield Shopping Centre.
What a suggestion. I wouldn't even dream of causing harm to Brent Cross. It's like a second home to me, is that?
You do it just to save money, so you couldn't go there anymore. So I thought the actor was sensational. The only problem was the sound. And I've discussed this.
The what? Sorry.
I've discussed this. Yeah, precisely. And I've discussed this at length with Collins, who produced Gangs of New York and many other films. And he said Nolan has this thing. He won't post-produce the sound. I thought I was going deaf. My hearing's terrible anyway. Joking aside, it is bad. But wow. The first 15 minutes,
the number of times that you don't hear me say this is your round, it's extraordinary.
No, the sound design is absolutely the music is incredible. It's some of the best music I think I've ever heard. The soundtrack alone is worth going for. It's a very long movie. It's an extraordinary piece of history. I didn't know it terribly well. I feel as though I know history better, but then I've read up on it since because I wanted to understand more and to know more detail behind it. But it's sort of one of those movies that you need to go and see on the biggest possible screen. If you can see it.
I was just literally going to say, I think if I'm going to see it,
not for TV.
I'd want to go and watch it at IMAX. That's what I think I'd want to go and see.
It deserves it. Yeah. It's a big movie and it deserves 70 mil. So try and get to an IMAX. And of course,
building up to the initial test where they didn't know what the hell was going to happen and everything was riding on it. And they spent, in those days, billions of dollars back in 45. Is so tense and terrifying because you're looking at it with the brilliance of hindsight because you know where this is going to lead and you know that the world will be from that instant forever changed. Not for the better. Not for the better.
And in a way, if the film dips anywhere, it dips just after the test. Because the build-up is so extraordinary. And then it gets mired slightly in a whole load of court cases that happen some years later, which are all the American security services really going back through people's history to find out whether they are really communists or not. America had become a completely different place by that stage. So it's, as a history piece, it's fascinating. And
don't you think, though, that there is something fantastic about, and it actually, I think, goes to demonstrate the brilliance of a director-producer to do this. But when a film is that educational, but it's all in the name of entertainment anyway, that someone actually walks away from a production. I use Titanic as a perfect example of this, right? To walk away and actually say, I now have a much better understanding of that moment in history.
Yeah.
Rather than actually saying to someone, you haven't studied history, you haven't sat through a history lesson, you haven't learned enough about this. What better way to get it out there than to make it in a way that's sort of entertaining and understandable and approachable, if you like, that someone can actually sort of say they've walked away from a film and learned something. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's got some cracking performances in as well. Cillian Murphy is extraordinary. For me, Robert Downey Jr. steals the screen. He's an extraordinary, versatile actor, Robert Downey.
Absolutely. Walks away with it.
Yeah. He plays the wife, and Tom Conti plays Einstein, which is sort of quite extraordinary. You see him and you think, what? But it's worth going to see, definitely worth going to see, and we'll get a ton of nominations come awards season, a ton. I don't know what it'll win, but it'll certainly be nominated in probably every category.
I'm going to put my hands in the hornet's nest, if I may.
Go on, go for it. Go for it.
And as you are a Hollywood queen, I'm going to ask you this, because I think Phil will have a view. Well, Phil will have a view. I've kind of got a view. David Baddiel.
Yeah.
Who I have enormous respect for. I've never met him. I'd love to meet Dave. And he said, well, he thought it was a mistake that the actor, Cillian Murphy, who I thought was excellent, not being Jewish, really couldn't bring us the full dimension to the part. I don't agree, because an actor is an actor. However, there is a new brouhaha this week, and I'd like your take on it, that there is a new biopic of Leonard Bernstein.
Correct. Bradley Cooper.
But it is Leonard Bernstein, which is played by Bradley Cooper. And Bradley Cooper is wearing a prosthetic nose to ostensibly more like Bernstein, who had quite a large shooter and who was Jewish. And again, people are saying, well, is this what they call, I'm going to use the words because we hear the word blackface all the time, which would be unacceptable. In other words, a white actor portraying a black person, you know, with Graham Norton being Martin Luther King, that would be possible, right? And people say, well, this is ridiculous. You know, you're having to dress this guy up, etc., etc. Why couldn't you get a Jewish actor? I'm just put in my 10 cents worth. Acting is acting, because if you extend that, it's like, well, just get serial killers to be serial killers, or you've got to get somebody from the mafia every time Scorsese makes a film. You know, they're acting. Can they do the job? Yes. Can they do the job? No. That's, for me, the only criteria. Where do you stand on that?
I'm absolutely with you in a serried rank. Acting is acting. I think it makes absolutely not a whit of difference that Bradley Cooper is not Jewish. Prosthetics are prosthetics. That's exactly what they are. And obviously they wanted the Bernstein character to look as authentic, but they wanted Bradley Cooper's fantastic finesse as an actor to be that person. So I think, you know, the physicality is, we're really going off at a tangent when we start going, only this type of person can play somebody gay, only this type of person can play somebody trans, only this type of person can play a milkman. This is ludicrous.
Well, but I'm totally willing to concede an actor should be, are they the best person for the role?
Yeah.
But other, I'm going to call minority groups, if you will, I'm just giving it a broad spectrum umbrella, okay, go absolutely crazy over this.
I know.
How dare a non-gay person play a gay part? Well, obviously there's enough gay actors, but is it the best person for the role? You know, you can't, either it applies to everybody or it applies to nobody. That's kind of how it should be, isn't it?
Yeah, the clue is in the word acting.
Is that really what it's about? Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see what your view was. Phil, what do you think?
I'm chomping at the bit here, believe me, because this
I know you are.
Absolutely winds me up something rotten. Here is I'll try and summarize this because I'm very aware I've only got 7 minutes left and we have got 1 or 2 other things to discuss with Chantal. So I'll try and summarize this as quickly as possible. I couldn't agree more with what you've both said. It should be about the talent of the individual and nothing else matters. I think in particular with Bradley Cooper wearing a prosthetic nose, what an absolute fuss over nothing. As far as I'm concerned, he's wearing a prosthetic nose because Leonard Bernstein had a slightly bigger nose. Was that because he's Jewish? Maybe. Who knows? Is that because Bradley Cooper and the people who make the film are trying to be racist? I don't think so. I think they're trying to be as authentic as they possibly can and try and make Bradley Cooper look like Bernstein. That's what I think they're doing. And how anyone can misinterpret it otherwise, I think is bonkers, frankly. But let's put that to one side. The other problem as well that I have, and this is something that you mentioned before, Russ, is that you said to have if you had someone like you mentioned Graham Norton playing someone like Martin Luther King. I agree. That would be slightly ridiculous. But I actually think it's ridiculous the other way around as well. And this is where I have a slight issue, is because it seems to be very much one-way traffic at the moment. And this is where I have a problem. So if you have a situation where you say you can't have someone who is white portraying someone who's black, then you should have a case where you say categorically someone who's black can't portray someone who is white. That is my humble opinion. I know people disagree with that, and they're very much into this colorblind notion that we live in this day and age. So I give the classic example of that. Chantal, you and I rather splendidly went to go and see the Lehman trilogy. We went to go and see that a couple of months back. Marvelous production. Honestly, I've never known 3 hours in the theatre to go by so quickly. It was extraordinary. But, and this is a big but, the Lehman brothers, the Lehman family, are obviously of Jewish descent, and they were of white Jewish descent as well. So to me, having a black actor portraying one of the Lehman brothers, in my humble opinion, was ridiculous. Absolutely stupid and didn't make sense at all. But I'm sure there'll be people who say, wasn't it wonderful? It's equal opportunity. Well, it doesn't make sense to me. Exactly the same way that when I went to go and see the Temptations musical, Ain't Too Proud, a couple of weeks ago, I would have been horrified if they would have had a white actor portraying one of the Temptations. It wouldn't have made sense and it wouldn't have been necessary. And sure enough,
it would have been bonkers.
But they didn't do it. They didn't do that because it wouldn't have been necessary. So here is my problem. It's a very much a one-way street at the moment. I don't like that. I think that needs to stop big time, because otherwise what you're doing is you're actually causing further divisions and more segregation. I think if people go looking for racism that's not there in the first place, all that is doing is trivializing when there is a genuine racist act that takes place. And that scares the hell out of me more than anything, because what happens is if you ram it down people's throats, they'll get sick of it. If they get sick of it, they'll take their eye off the ball, and genuine racism could rise to the top. That's my humble.
Well spoken, my friend.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take you very quickly to Barbie Land, because I need to.
That's all we got time for today, Chantal. It's been a treat. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. See ya. Bye.
That's not fair. I want to talk about Barbie.
Go on then.
Listen, you boys have got to go and see Barbie. I have to say, it's very funny. The script.
I hear it's brilliant.
I'm washing my hair that day.
No, you're not. You have to go and see it. I'm absolutely.
This one here, I'm washing.
Stop it.
Honestly, it's so clever. It's written by Greta Gerwig, the director, and her bloke, who's a very, very, very good writer-director called Noah Baumbach, who wrote Marriage Story, if you saw that a few years ago, that was nominated for all sorts of awards. Bizarrely, Greta Gerwig, the last time I met her and I interviewed her was when she was directing Little Women. So she's gone from Little Women to Barbie. I mean, what a career. The woman is so clever.
How the mighty have fallen.
No, absolutely. This is the biggest movie.
Oh, no, I know. It's a big box office smash, I know.
The script is really clever. It's much funnier than you think it's going to be. And it's a brilliant satire. It's absolutely tremendous. Ryan Gosling steals every scene. He's so funny. He's so quick-witted. And he just knows how to deliver a line and a look. And Margot Robbie is Barbie. She's just drop dead good looking. She's as pretty as a picture. And she plays the role of regular Barbie. And they leave Barbie Land and they have to go to normal land, which turns out to be, Russ, you and I know it well, Santa Monica and Los Angeles. And they hang out there. What they think is normal. You and I know this is not normal anyway. And they have to go meet the people from Mattel, who are, of course, the company behind Ken and Barbie. And honestly, it's very funny. It's very quick-witted. It's 2 hours, it's 2 hours, fortunately, just under 2 hours of great magic. It looks wonderful. The music's rubbish. Forget the music. It doesn't work, but the rest of it is great. It's a lovely satire and it has to be seen. And it does leave you with a question about what is womankind and what is mankind. And
which is a question that seems unanswerable in 2023.
It's worth still asking the question. Go and see it. You'll see what I mean.
Marvelous stuff.
And Chantal, here's something that you wouldn't know. You are looking at the man who was charged with introducing the Cindy doll into the United States to take on Barbie, which at the time, when I was very young, but had a massive job, I said, this is a terrible idea. You will never defeat Barbie. And I was told I didn't know what I was talking about. Boy, was I right. Boy, were they wrong.
The irony is that those who were pushing it...
You can't take on Barbie. You can't...
The irony was those who ended up pushing it wound up on the doll. And on that note, thank you very much indeed, Chantal.
Boom!
You're most welcome. Thank you, Chantal. Are you off for a couple of weeks, aren't you now? Or is that in a couple of weeks' time you're off for a couple of weeks?
No. I'm going to China next month. So no,
Okay,
I'll be here next Friday.
Okay.
Marvelous stuff. See
Well,
you then,
excellent.
Chantal.
We certainly look forward to that. Thank
Bye.
you so much. Phil, bless you for everything that you do. As always, you've been amazing this week for reasons I'm not going to go into completely. I'll be back on Monday, God willing. Until then, have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.